Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Promising Young Woman. So, I was kind of unsure about this movie because I was like, okay, this is like a character in a very weird nurse outfit. I'm like, what is this movie about? I went into the trailer and I was like, you know what? This trailer, this idea, like, seems really interesting. But I'm like, there has to be some more legs uh, to this movie than this trailer. I'm hoping there's something really here that can really just have me go, wow, this movie. Um, I went into this film and saw it, and I'm like, this movie is clever. I like this film. It's an intelligent movie. Even though I also have one thing in rebuttal about this film, if I'm going to praise it and I'm going to say that I liked it, um, I don't think it probably has much rewatchable value, but because it's a very dark film, it's a very dark themed film about women who are going on and getting taken advantage of. Um, and so there's that kind of going on. So some people may not like that kind of movie, and I completely understand. So, with that said, the one thing that I have to go on and say as a negative for this movie, because we have Cassandra that is to never go on and find these guys at the local YMCA or the pharmacy or really at work for the most point. And so, really, they're just massively lumping all men that would probably go on and do this kind of thing to be a guy who's at a bar. And so, for me, I've not gone in a bar in years, and very rarely do I, or very rarely do I even get drunk. So, but hey, I'm not perfect either. There's several things about me that is nowhere near that. Um, but they're kind of lumping all men into a certain category for the most point in this movie, and that, like, eventually just is to just be like, well, like, that's because you should just stop going to a bar. Stop going to this bar. Completely, this thing never happens. You would have to stop scratching marks into your notebook every single time. If you went on and tried this anywhere else besides a bar, it wouldn't work. So, because a number of men would go on and be like, okay, why is this girl drunk in a pharmacy, in a YMCA, in a karate class? This doesn't make sense. But anyways, so with that said, for this movie, we have a story where Cassandra is to have had a friend. I say had a friend because there's a reason for that, named Nina, who had gone on and eventually been taken advantage of by some school friends of hers, some med school friends of hers. And so Cassandra was to eventually decide to drop out of med school. And so then Cassandra goes on, and because of her friend Nina, Cassandra goes to these bars once a week to pretend that she is almost blackout drunk, that she can barely control herself, that she may not even have her phone on her. And so we have a number of guys who all seem nice at first that are like, hey, like, I want to try to do the right thing and get this girl and bring her home. But then all of a sudden, we have these guys that go on and know nothing really about this woman, and they barely even know her name. And so they start kissing her. They start declothing her, or they start touching her. And so we have Cassandra that is still quite coherent, that is kind of waiting things out, that is just kind of seeing if this is going to go the way it normally does. And then Cassandra pulls away this aha moment, just be like, excuse me, what are you doing? Making her look completely coherent, going on and eventually have her seem like she is completely sober, and then turning around and then blaming the man of which that she had gone on and been in this place with, and is to ridicule him for what he was to go on and do. Even though these guys are to have some excuses to just say, like, well, it seemed like we had a connection. It seems like we had this. We had a vibe between one another. And Cassandra's like, a connection? Like, do you know anything about me? And the guy's like, well, no. What a weird connection. So, yeah, and we also have Cassandra that is kind of putting the fear in God of these men, to have Cassandra say that she's not the only one that tries to do this kind of thing, and that there are other women out there that are to have scissors on them. Do a little snip. Yikes. So, but Cassandra is to bump into an old friend of hers, who, of course, is Ryan. And while Cassandra was going on and talking to an old friend, Ryan, who seems like a nice guy for most of this film, we have to also realize that Cassandra, based on kind of previous events, we also have to realize that Cassandra is to possibly have some mental problems, some mental issues, which will lead her to want to go on and want revenge on a guy who seems to have everything going for him. Everything's wonderful, everything's working out, and also Cassandra is to go on and find every single person attached to what happened to Nina in her past, and Cassandra is going to get even with them in a very creative way. To the point of us, I thought it was interesting when Cassandra goes on and meets with the lawyer named Jordan, and like Jordan is to seemingly have a screw loose and just be like, well, hey, like, are you here to do something to me? Like, are you here to, like, go ahead, like, like, go on, like, please, like. And Cassandra's like, wow, yeah, like, okay, like, this guy is kind of beating himself up enough about this. Like, I think I'm just gonna back away. So, but yeah, but we also have Cassandra, who has, like, parents that, like, and this girl is supposedly hits 30 years old, and her parents are going on and saying, like, well, hey, like, why don't you have a life, Cassandra? Like, we're gonna go on and tell you one way or another that you need to just get a life. And I'm like, so you're saying at this 30-year-old girl's birthday party that she needs to get a life? And I'm like, man, am I depressed. Man, am I depressed. Oh, wow. That was like the worst scene of this whole entire movie, about that whole birthday thing. And I was just like, could you just find a steak somewhere and just God, how awful was that? But anyways, let's just go into spoilers about this one. So I would have to say that this movie, like, it's a good film besides the, like, what actually, like, is to be sadly enough, the theme here. Um, because like it's just clever. I would have to go on and give it a thumbs up, even though really I'm just like, man, people are gonna have all kinds of feelings about this movie, and I get people are gonna hate this film, and I get people are gonna have oddly just previous experiences that they're bringing into possibly this review, regardless of how they felt about the movie, regardless if they knew anything about this movie ahead of time, because there's those people. Or really, some people are just like, man, like, what the fuck? Like, come on. Like, why? Like, this movie is awful just based on theme alone. Because people have all those kinds of feelings. I get it. But I liked a movie that actually had like something to have me just go wow, like something that I can actually watch and just be like, wow, that was something there. Um, Instead of just going on and being bored for 2 hours, because that's usually what happens. So with that said, let's go into that double five time territory, because it's about that time to just go into what, of course, is to usually be spoilers. So movie is available on HBO Max. You can dare, in fact, watch it there. So I think it's about that time to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to get to spoil this movie. Let's go into what happens here. So we're, of course, setting up in the beginning of this movie. We have a girl named Cassandra who is to pretend that she's drunk in a bar. She just kind of go on like like, oh yeah, I gotta like this girl has to go on and really put on a show and like make it seem like she's really like drunk, so that way people would notice her. So we have Jimmy, or we have Jerry, my bad. We have Jerry, and we have Jim, and we have Paul. Man, you know what? I'll say this, though. Adrien Brody. I always like Adrien Brody. If anyone was to ever watch The OC, really like The OC. But Adam Brody, if I can even say his name correctly, Adam Brody. Adam Brody can go on and play the good guy and the bad guy, and like you would buy him as both. That is probably the best thing about Adam Brody, is he can play both sides of the sword, and I like that kind of actor where you can buy them as both hero and villain, and it's kind of always interesting. So Jerry goes on, and we have guys taking or taking bets on who's going to take this girl home. And Jerry's like, you know what? I'll go and I'll take this girl. I'll try to do the right thing. And the guys are like, okay, sure. So Jerry goes on and is to ask this girl. It's like, well, hey, like, are you okay? Like, so Jerry's like, are you gonna go home soon? What's gonna happen here? And Cassandra's like, yeah, I don't have my phone, and I was trying to get a car app, and Jerry's like, yeah, you would probably need a phone for that. Cassandra's like, yeah, I probably would. So Jerry ends up getting the car app, and I'm kind of curious who paid for that. I'm kind of curious who paid, because when really looking at it, like Jerry was the nice guy to pay for this woman to eventually like kind of get out of this bar so she doesn't drink anymore. So Jerry brings this girl home, maybe possibly because he didn't know where her address really was, and maybe that this girl was so drunk that she didn't even remember. So like trying to go on and do some like thought process in my head to really just be like, okay, like how could we kind of go into this story and justify why this girl is at this guy's address and not hers, because rarely ever does this girl really go to her own home. She goes to theirs. Regardless. So, Jerry is to go on and pour Cassandra another drink. And here's the thing. So, he ends up going on and getting a little glass for himself and pours a whole glass for this girl. I'm like, you piece of shit. Like, you know what? You could have really, like, saved it if you had the same amount in each glass. But then once you did that, it's like, yeah, not liking this guy now. There could have been some justifiable things, but then the whole different portions of glass thing. So Jerry is to go on and give this girl a drink as he's quickly finishing his. And so Jerry starts kissing this woman that he barely knows, and then is to go on and drop her into this bed, where then he is to start kissing this woman more, to the point of then undoing her underwear, to then have Cassandra, who is to wake up and just be like, what are you doing? To where now we understand what's kind of really going on here. That Cassandra is to go on and play this woman who is to seemingly be almost blackout drunk. But then she is to just be like, hey, like, you're doing something wrong here. So, and I thought that that was interesting. And every kind of single time we have like a certain iteration of this kind of going on, it's kind of interesting to kind of see like different variations of characters. So Cassandra is to go on and shun these kind of characters and blah 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 blah. So then she goes home and is to have her parents ask her, it's like, well, hey, like, you had another late night shift? And Cassandra's like, yeah, I had to go on and do inventory. And they're like, well, like, you are getting home kind of late, kind of thing. So they're kind of being protective parents. So and plus, like, they also don't like smell like that she's drunk, that she's like, maybe she was to cleverly like shower, and like they couldn't have like noticed that she had alcohol in her breath. Because yeah, like, she was supposedly sober, but like she also had one drink. But either way, so we have a moment in that whole like 30th birthday thing. I'll quickly kind of bring that up, and then because I've already kind of mentioned that moment. And so Susan and Stanley, who are both Cassandra's parents, are to talk to Cassandra and have this gift for her, and Cassandra didn't even remember that it's her own birthday. And her parents are like, seriously, you don't even know it's your own birthday? Like, honestly, for me, I wouldn't remember my birthday either. I would just be like, oh, I guess it's May, all right? Like I probably would remember what day of the week my birthday is, but like I would be like, okay, it's probably May, so birthday is gonna come up soon. Great, but like, really, it's kind of like a quickly passing thing, because it just happens every year. But like, this girl like completely forgot that she even had a birthday. And so we have Susan that's going on and saying that Cassandra's 30 years old and like this and that and all that garbage. And so both Stanley and Susan end up giving her a thing of luggage as a birthday gift. And Cassandra's like, wow, what a piece of work. So they're obviously in code telling Sandra to get the out. And so Cassandra goes to her coffee working job and is to work with Gail. And so we have Cassandra telling Gail the story, And Gail's like, wow, yeah, like, well, like maybe you should go on and kind of like find a place. Like, you probably have money saved up, right, Cassandra? And Cassandra's like, well, yeah, but like, and Gail's like, well, maybe I should just kind of fire you from this job, so it'll kind of push you to go on. And Cassandra's like, no, like, don't do that. And Gail's like, well, no, of course not. But we also have Cassandra that's going on and not being the best like coffee worker either. Where there's some person that's coming in front of the counter and Cassandra's like, yeah, whatever, woman. I don't like I don't want any time of day for you. so uh so we go on and we have Cassandra who continues to find these men. And so we go on and we have another guy named Neil, played by Christopher Mintz Place. The guy who, of course, people probably remember him from Superbad, but he's done a number of other things. Like, I always like to like kind of point out one thing, but like there's a lot of actors that go on and do a number of other things also. So Neil is to be this kind of coke addict that he is doing a number of lines with Cassandra while at home. I'm like, so why did this guy go to the bar? Which obviously that's where he went. So this guy went to the bar to get drunk, and then he came back home and is doing lines of coke to get high. I'm so confused. Like, he couldn't have just gone and just stayed home, got high, and anybody see the hole in this problem? So Neil, of course, is to take Cassandra, and it seems that Neil is to be somehow technically the nicer guy when Cassandra is to eventually go on and finally confront this guy, only because Neil is to consistently try to wake Cassandra to talk to her more, or to wake her up and kiss her. And to the point where when Neil finally does go on and slip some fingers, let's just say, Cassandra is supposedly awake during. And then when finally Cassandra is to change and then be the sober person, Cassandra's like, wow, like, you know what, like, normally a lot of guys would go on and just wait till I fell asleep and then do what they were going to do anyways. But wow, Neil, like, you you seem like a nicer guy, because at least you would want to have me be awake the whole time. And Neil's like, wait a minute, what's going on? Like, I'm getting so paranoid. I'm very high right now. And so Cassandra's like, yeah, like, I wanted to go on and just and point this out to you and seek revenge because like, what would have happened if I really would have been this kind of girl, blah 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 blah. So another guy bites the dust and is to be another mark upon Cassandra's notebook, because it seems that there is a huge massive number of marks on this notebook from all guys who drink at a bar or get cocaine and get high. Again, none of these things of which I do, but I might still be a horrible person, and that's okay at the end of the day. So now we have Cassandra that is to again be at work, and she is to meet up with a guy named Ryan, who seems for the most part to be a nice guy. So, and this is played by Bo Burnham. So Ryan is to, of course, talk to Cassandra like, oh yeah, like we went to like school together, and like he's kind of bring up old times, and it seems that at some point Ryan was to hurt Cassandra's feelings, and Ryan was to say, it's like, well, you know what, like, if you probably like spit in my coffee, like I wouldn't like I would honestly have deserved it. So we have Cassandra right in front of Ryan going and doing that. I'm like, oh, gross. I always kind of like pan away when I have those certain scenes in movie. I always try to avoid those because they're freaking gross. But I don't know what happens in a new film, so that's always great. So Ryan goes on and he drinks the thing anyways, and he's like, "Well, like, oh well, like, so, do you want to go on a date? Do you want to hang out?" So Cassandra is to hang out with Ryan, and so Ryan is to mention some old, just kind of catch up, and want to mention and rattle off some old friends of hers. So Cassandra was to go on and mention to Cassandra, or so Ryan was to mention to Cassandra, well, like, well, hey, like, you used to be like the best friend with like Madison, right? And Cassandra's like, no, I think you have me confused with somebody else. And Ryan's like, oh, okay. And so Ryan is also mentioning about a guy named Al Monroe who is getting married and he is to have kids and all this stuff. So we have Cassandra who's going on like, oh, Al Monroe, like because of course Al was to have some connection with Cassandra's friend Nina, and Cassandra doesn't go on and tell Ryan that, but eventually he'll find out about it somewhere in this film. So after Cassandra is to go on and start talking to Ryan, bringing up these old memories of her being in med school and how she went on and dropped off out of med school, and Ryan was kind of questioning why, and eventually was to have the reason why he's like, oh, like, well, I guess I'm kind of being an a-hole, so if you want to spit in my coffee. so so we have Ryan that is to go out with Cassandra, and it seems that things are going well. Like by the end of their first date, we have them kind of walking past Ryan's place, and Ryan's like, "Oh, like what a coincidence! Like this is right by my place. Like do you want to go in for a drink, or do you want to just call it a night, or what do you want to do?" And Cassandra is just like, well, maybe this is too soon or something. And Ryan's like, oh my god, I ruined this, didn't I? And so Cassandra just kind of like walks off and gets a vehicle. So but it seems that Cassandra is to give Ryan a break, and so they go on and they just kind of continue dating, and it seems that things are going well for the most point. So all of a sudden we go on and we have Cassandra who is doing these side missions without Ryan knowing about it. So let's talk about those side missions. So we have Cassandra that is meeting up with Madison at this dinner place to kind of catch up. So we have Cassandra who is talking to Madison and kind of reminding her about Nina, and while also kind of catching up. And so most of the time, Madison is just talking about her two kids and how she used to have twins and so on and so forth. So Cassandra is to go on and drink seltzer while uh, we have, of course, Madison who's getting really drunk. So Madison like is to continue to drink because she hasn't drank I guess in a very long time, to the point of her even spilling wine upon this table. She gets so kind of drunk, and so we have Cassandra who is to finally walk away from this table, and she of course is looking at a guy that is across the bar, and he's like, go ahead and do it. So what ends up happening is this guy is to go to Madison and take her up to her room. And so Madison is to think that she was to go on and have some affair. It was to ruin her life. And Madison is to desperately go and be calling Cassandra and be like, well, yeah, like I think something happened. I think I was drunk, this and that. And da, 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 da. So, come to find out later, Cassandra is to come clean with Madison to just tell her that, yeah, that guy, I hired that guy, and like he was just hired to bring you back to your room and take care of you, and that's all he was to do. And so Madison's like, oh, thank God. Like, but you never call me again. But Madison was to also give Cassandra this video for Cassandra to watch. Because I guess during the time it might have been funny, but now having Madison be living this moment now, not so funny. So, because that's Madison's words. So, uh, so now that we've covered that, so we also have Cassandra, who is to go back to med school, supposedly. And so she is going on and talking to Dean Walker to go back into med school. And Dean's like, oh, like you're going back to med school? Like, good for you. Like, all right. So, and Cassandra's like, well, yeah, like, and also I wanted to just kind of like talk to you about like the past also. Dean's like, oh, okay, all right. So we have Cassandra that is mentioning Nina's name, and Dean Walker is like, oh no, like I don't remember anything about that girl. And it's like, oh, you don't, do you? Because Cassandra was to say that Nina had gone to this school after this whole taken advantage of thing had happened, and so Nina had went to this school, and it seems that the school might have been paid off, or something might have happened somewhere or another, and the school was to have kind of taken Rich Boy's word over Nina's word, because maybe there was some funding being done from the school to be put into it anyways, hush money maybe. And so Dean Walker was to go on and kind of do nothing towards Nina's case. And so, while Cassandra was going on and talking to Dean Walker, just be like, well, yeah, like, it's nice catching up, because here's something that I'm going to, like, also tell you. Because Cassandra was to go on and pretend that she was some makeup artist for some wet dream band, some wet dream boy band, weird, goofy thing. So, Cassandra is to tell the dean that she had taken her younger daughter and brought her to some room where there was a number of men that had been drinking a lot of vodka, and they're probably not going to be quite sure how old this girl really is, but I guess it probably won't matter, right? And so the dean is like, oh my god, where is my daughter? Where is she? What room is she in? And then finally, when Cassandra is getting this dean upset enough, afraid enough, Cassandra is then to go on and tell this dean, you know what, actually, your daughter is actually at this diner. and oh, here's her cell phone because you just called it. My bad. I completely forgot to give her back her cell phone. Man, Butterfingers, right? So, Cassandra is to go on and tell the dean to call this diner ahead of time to see if she's really there, because she will be. And then Cassandra just walks off. To really just say that Cassandra is probably never going to go to med school again. Now is she? So, and with the way this movie kind of ends, we'll get to that. So I was like, dang, like that is some crazy that happened in this movie. I'm like, wow, like the fear of just, wow, that was crazy. And I was like, I was believing every minute of it. And I was like, wow, this is so interesting during that portion of this film. So we then turn around, and so Cassandra is to go on and have things going so well with her and with her boyfriend Ryan, to the point of Ryan just going on and is like going to dinner with Cassandra's parents, and they're like, well, hey, yeah, I made the sauce, I made this, I made that. And Ryan's like, yeah, this is good. Yeah, this is thumbs up, everybody. Compliments to the chef. So Ryan eventually is in bed with Cassandra and is saying, like, you know what, I think I've fallen in love with you. And Cassandra's to go on of like, well, I think I've fallen in love with you too. And we have a moment where we have this kind of between these two that is to kind of make Ryan look like a good guy, but there's also some other things coming towards a portion of this film, because we have Ryan that before he goes on and tells Cassandra that he loves her, Ryan is still thinking that like maybe Cassandra really isn't all that interested, like it just kind of seems like she's off, or it just seems like she's not really there, what's going on. And so we have Cassandra that goes to another bar to pick up a guy that I was like, wait a minute, like isn't that the same guy from the early part of the film? But it's the guy who was Paul, and he has this fedora on, so he looks tweakingly different. So Paul is to take Cassandra, who looks drastically different than how she looked before, and we have Paul that is weirdly going on here and like carrying this girl out of this bar, and he's saying that like he doesn't know if he can go on and get some ride here, and that they may just need to walk for like a mile and a half with this girl who is just kind of very tipsy. And Paul's like, yeah, you could probably walk for a mile and a half, right? My house is just down here. I live with my parents and this and that. So Paul then is to be with Cassandra, and all of a sudden Ryan was to have supposedly worked, but then he ended up getting like this kind of switch shift at the last minute kind of thing, and so he could go with his friends to go to a bar. So Ryan all of a sudden meets Cassandra and Paul at this bar, and he's like, what? Cassandra? Like, I thought we were, like, together. Like, I thought, what? Huh? So Ryan is now just like, you know what? Like, whatever. Like, go on and just, like, do what you're going to do. So Ryan walks off, and Paul is to finally realize that Cassandra is now breaking character and she's now much more sober than she really was. And Paul's like, wait a minute, like, you're that girl who, like, Jerry was talking about that, like, had done that trick on him. Like, I knew it was you. There's something about it. So Cassandra's like, well, yeah, and a lot of other girls do this too, and they have scissors. So Paul's like, oh my god. So here's the thing, though. This honestly does break this thing wide open. When you really think about it, Cassandra is to go into these certain bars locally, right? And even Gail is to say that Cassandra thought like she was at some bar at some point. Cassandra's like, no, that wasn't me. That was some other person. I don't know what you're talking about. Here's kind of the whole for this, though. How many people would probably regularly go to a bar or even work at a bar to go on and realize that a girl would normally get very drunk? Normally, like, eventually, if one person at a bar were to get tricked like this, probably the one guy in that bar would see some other guy pulling the same thing, and that guy would probably walk over to that guy like, hey, this girl is tricking you, don't fall for that. Especially if Cassandra, how many bars is she going to consistently keep going to? Is she going to find a different bar every single time? Is she going to go to clubs? Is she going to go out of her way to drive for hours to find a certain bar that she can go and meet another guy so that way she doesn't go to the same bar or same club consistently? Don't know. So, mum's the word, I guess. If someone is to get tricked, they won't tell anybody else, hey, don't fall for this. So, Cassandra is to go on and realize that she had lost a good guy, maybe. So, we have it at some point where Ryan, instead of completely giving up on Cassandra, he finally just goes back to work. Is like, you know what, you piece of like, let's date again. Like, come on, like, just go out with me. Like, to where it's like he like forgives her quickly, I guess, because like he doesn't really have much of any options. Even though he's a doctor that is to perform things on children, you would think a lot of women would be like, oh, swoon. And like, it's kind of interesting how they have to kind of break down. It's like, well, hey, what's the difference between a regular doctor and a kid doctor? It's like, and we have it, of course, where Ryan's like, well, there's not really much of any difference. There's not much. So we go on into the story, and so Cassandra is to get this video about what had happened with Nina, because I guess one of the guys had been dumb and recorded this whole video of what had happened to Nina. So all of a sudden, we have Cassandra watching this video, and she hears a voice in the background that sounds very familiar. So Cassandra goes on and needs to confront Ryan because she's like, I need to talk to you right now. And Ryan's like, well, I'm at work. And Cassandra's like, well, I need right now to talk to you. Ryan's like, okay, like, are you okay? What's going on? So Ryan takes her into a certain room. So Cassandra is to go on and play Ryan that tape. And Ryan was in the background of that video. And she's like, aha, like, I got you. Like, so, like, you're just as guilty as all of those other men. And so I'm not gonna date you anymore because you're just as piece of as all those other guys. You didn't come forward. You didn't say anything. because really for you probably would have gone on and you probably would have eventually either had some jail time or something would have happened to you. So, like, that's why you were like, mum's the word. So, Cassandra is kind of teasing to possibly, one way or the other, want to put this video out there to be seen by people. And Ryan's like, don't do that. Like, that'll ruin my career and this and that. And Cassandra's like, well, like, I don't care. Like, don't. And so Cassandra is asking Ryan exactly where this bachelor party for Al is. And Ryan tells her the address. And we have Cassandra saying, like, hey, don't tell anybody I'm coming or video will be released. So Ryan is like, so you're gonna blackmail me, you're gonna hang this over my head, and like, I don't think I want to go on and have that happen to me. And Cassandra's like, well, tough, like, it's gonna happen. So now we have to go on and talk about the attorney, Jordan. So Cassandra goes on to this lawyer, and Jordan is to open this door and say, like, well, hey, like, I don't know what you're here for, but if you're here to talk to me about practicing law, I don't do that anymore. And Cassandra's like, no, I just wanted to just talk to you. So Cassandra goes on and sits in this guy's his place, and Cassandra is to mention this case with Al being involved. And we go on and we have Jordan who's like, oh, well, like, you know what, I've done a lot of cases, but I'm assuming that the woman that you're probably going to talk to me about is a girl named Nina. And Cassandra's like, oh my god, he knew the name? He cared? And Jordan goes on and he's like, yes, like, you know what, if you're going to come in here and you're going to hurt me because of what I did to that case, or if you're going to go on and do something to me, like, I deserve it. Like, I can't sleep. Like, I can't sleep. So whatever you're going to do to me, like, it's probably well deserved. Like, go on and do whatever you need to do. And Cassandra's like, oh my god, like, this guy. So Cassandra's like, I'm getting out of here. This guy seems like a good person. I'll let him go. And there was to be another guy that Cassandra was going to pay to beat this guy up. And the guy's like, well, hey, like, am I going to get paid? And Cassandra's like, yeah, but don't go on and don't do what you were going to do. The guy's like, okay, great. So he leaves. And so, because Cassandra goes on and uses Jordan later, which I thought was so cool, because she thought about this, like, ahead of time, knowing full well, planning this to a T. So Cassandra goes on to this bachelor party and is to put on this, like, rainbow colored hair and this nurse outfit like we see here, and make her way to this bachelor party where she is to look like this lady of the night, so to speak. So Cassandra is to make her way to this place where none of the guys were expecting a stripper. So Cassandra is to go on and get all of these guys drunk, and then is to supposedly go into the room with Al. Al doesn't recognize this girl, and so Al is to go into this room, and so we have Cassandra that is to handcuff this guy to this bed, and then Cassandra is to go on and say that her name is really Nina Fisher. And Al's kind of happy expression is to all of a sudden drastically change. They're like, no, F that. Like, get out of here. Like, I know that name, and I know that girl. That girl is dead. Oh my god. So I guess what had happened from this story is probably lawyers and everybody and the brother had gone on and put the fear of whatever in people to and paid them off and hush money them to eventually have nothing be put to justice for Nina, to where Nina in turn went on and was so haunted by this whole story and the fact that she never got justice that she possibly ended up maybe taking her own life. Not quite sure. But what a tragic story. So, Cassandra was to go on and was to say that Nina was to consistently have Al's name just wherever she was to go. Even, it seemed, all over her body because of all the bruises that she was to have gone on and had at some point because of that horrible event, reminding her every moment of what had happened to her. So, Cassandra, to get even, wanted to carve Nina's name into Al. And before that was to go on and happen, Al goes on and is to break one of the handcuffs and is to get on top of Cassandra and is to take a pillow to this woman and suffocate her. And then she is dead. All the guys end up waking for the next day, and they're all just like, well, okay, like, this woman is dead. We could have really kind of wrote this off as Al, like, defending himself from this woman, and they could have wrote it off as that. To have this girl have so many, like, medications or so many scalpels and all these things and, like, caught Al off guard, that could have really worked to, like, sell a self-defense thing. But then come and turn around and they have, of course, where instead of Al going and having this be a defensive thing, we have Joe who's talking to Al and saying, like, well, like, you know, we're gonna take care of this. Like, we're gonna do away with the body before everybody notices. So they go on and they burn the body and they cremate it. And so then they go off and have this wedding, of course, where Ryan is there, like, for every bit of it, at the wedding, after party, and everything. So we are to still, like, we, sadly enough, are to realize that Cassandra is dead. But so, here's the kicker. So, we have Jordan getting a letter from Cassandra stating that, for if I am to disappear, Cassandra is to go on and tell Jordan to not only release this video, but is to kind of bring this note to the authorities. And Jordan is to kind of quickly take this and be like, heck yeah, I'm gonna, whatever this girl says, like, I'm going to go on and do this to the letter. What if this guy could have went on and said, like, no S given, and thrown this letter away? Like, she really trusted on that Jordan guy. This guy could have been a loon also. This guy could have been crazy. So we have it where Jordan is to go to the authorities with this. And we also had Cassandra's parents who were filing a missing persons report. And that led to this detective going to Ryan while he was still at work before he goes to this wedding. And the detective's like, well, like, do you think that this person wasn't mentally stable? Like, because that's what her father said. And Ryan's like, yeah, I think she kind of was. Like, would she hurt herself? Probably. And so Ryan is going on and like he's just kind of repeating whatever the detective is saying, and like he's not coming up with anything original on his own. And so like I would be kind of sketchy about this guy who's not coming up with any kind of like his own kind of story. But like I don't know. um so but the detective just says like, okay, well, you can come into the department and we'll file an official statement and so on and so forth. And Ryan's like, okay. So he goes to this wedding, and we have this prepared text that Ryan is getting from Cassandra and Nina to just be like, well, hey, like, um, how is the wedding? Uh, if you think that this is over, it's over now. And like love ya and wink and this and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my god, yeah. Probably all these guys are gonna get turned in and questioned, and everybody who is tied to this or affected by this will probably eventually also get taken in also. So a number of these people are all gonna realize like, oh my god, we did this, and you can't take it back, sadly enough. But not only that, like they end up finding the cremated remains of Cassandra, and that immediately is just like, hey, arrest this guy, arrest this dude. He like he's the culprit, he's the dude. So Al ends up getting arrested for murder, is gonna spend the rest of his life probably in jail, as well as a number of these people that are probably all connected to all of these things that Jordan is to have this video of. So yeah, and that whole prepared text thing was like icing on top of the cake, to just kind of wrap up this movie. So here's the thing though, so we're never really going to go on and have like a sequel of this movie, because isn't that obvious? But kind of Gale was to also get the other half of Cassie's necklace to possibly have as like evidence to just be like, well, hey, like Cassie obviously had this necklace on her. So maybe saying at some point that there might be like a promising young woman sequel, but it might be like someone else doing this. I don't know. um I think eventually, like, I would probably be open for there to be a sequel, but probably not the exact same kind of movie. Like, I think they would have to up the ante on creativeness to if they're going to go with the sequel. Because I think that this movie is good enough, but I don't know if I would want to see another kind of this movie. Um, but again, uh, this movie is clever. I like the movie because it's clever. So good on these people for giving me something that instead of me being bored for 2 hours, I was actually just like, wow, this is really interesting. So bravo to that. So that's it. I think I'm going to get out of here, so I can kind of quickly wrap this all up. Hopefully I covered most of everything within this movie. I probably didn't do it as perfect as the movie did, but I think there was also reasons for me kind of covering certain things at certain times, to kind of gear up for the next step of what happens in this film. So let me know how you felt about this movie, either good or bad, or you brutally hated this movie, because there's some people that will just go on and hate a film because they can. It's a possibility. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, everybody.